to the show.
Thank you.
So for purposes, is it JG or Jeremy? Because I hear you called both.
So I have learned to love JG.
Okay.
I've never been called JG like throughout my life, but like I think Dana started it when I was going through, and so JG kind of stuck, and then so I'm fine with JG,
Yeah, or either.
or either. Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
honestly.
nice. And you're here, so thank you.
Of course.
Let's talk a bit about you and your journey. Like, why are you on my show today? Typically, we talk to staff and people who've overcome their own adversities, which is why this podcast was created, more or less.
Well, so I mean, I've been at Elevate since April of 2023, and I've been working at Elevate since September 7th of 2023.
Wow.
And before that, I was in the restaurant game, and as you can imagine, it's just I was working at Pebble Beach, and it was a grind. And during that time, I was also doing the AT&T, and there was just a lot going on in my personal life, and I think it was just time for me to just find some way to be able to find myself again. And I think we did, me and my family, who was awesome throughout this whole process, we were able to find out, they actually found Elevate. And what kind of drew us to Elevate was the fact that it's like more holistic, but really like the CrossFit aspect of it. And so like the health and fitness part. And that was one thing that like did not exist, because in 2006, I went to college and I blew my shoulder out playing football. And so I stopped playing sports, really. And that was like my identity throughout my whole childhood and all the way into college.
Because you played through high school, you played prior to high school.
Yeah,
that was it. That's what you were going to do.
Yeah, exactly. That was, and ask any kid who's ever played football, they're going to play in the NFL, right?
Absolutely.
And that was my thought process too.
What was your position?
I played inside linebacker in college. And then, like I said, I blew my shoulder out. And so I went to surgery, did all that. And when I woke up from surgery, the doctor looked at me and he's like, "You're never going to play again." And so I remember like that moment of like your whole identity's gone, and you're 18 with no backup plan. So,
and your brain's not fully formed at that point. So
I had no idea about what I was going to do.
What a complete like pivot. And again, it's not like self-created. It wasn't like you went and did something super stupid, so now you got to deal with the consequences. This is something that happened by doing something you love.
Yeah. And so what was I going to do now? Right. And like, I couldn't go off of my looks, so I had to figure out a way to get into the party, right? So
you didn't want to be a male model.
I couldn't do that game. So I ended up playing like guitar and going to bars and like bartending and getting into that life young. And it kind of just translated into a career into that. And
you were a musician at some point.
I started playing some. Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like I had to figure out a way to get girls to like you. Now they're not on the football team anymore,
right?
So
and they love musicians.
They love musicians. So I saw a dude play guitar one time at a party, and I was like, and all these girls, like, oh, okay. Like, I get it now, right?
Yeah. So and he's not even like a top of the line, great looking, great playing guy. He just was a guitarist, and it was like the girls were flocking.
I was like, okay, I can see this. All right. So I picked up a guitar and started playing.
You self-taught?
Self-taught. And this is right when like YouTube started to kind of kick off a little bit. So there's a lot of like YouTube videos you can watch, tutorials, right?
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and then because I was in the bar game, I was able to just be like, hey, I'll go up and play and stuff like that. And that kind of transitioned into other musicians seeing me play, and they're like, hey, let's get together. And then so the band stuff started around then.
But that had to be really difficult for a young guy with girls all over him, playing in bars, just that whole scene as like normal. Kind of like the restaurant industry. What you're surrounded by is not necessarily normal, but an inundation of drugs and alcohol and women and all the things at a very young age.
And especially like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll comes into the play. Like that's what we all wanted to do. Like, that was the hope, right? Like that was the dream, like to be the next, Leonard Skinner or whoever it was. And like when I moved to the South, I moved to Florida, and there was so much country rock kind of vibe, so I fit that vibe pretty well. And so like that hardcore scene where you stay up till 4 a.m. every night, that whole thing, like that was just normal. That was just what life was. And you kind of lose sight of like that kid. When I was playing football, I didn't do anything. I went to school and did football. That was it. And then after I started with the bar scene, I forgot what the sun looked like. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you just forget normalcy and like routine and all of that stuff.
How'd your family handle that? That's quite a pivot from where you what your trajectory was.
Yeah. So they were actually okay with it at first because like I was lucky enough to find some relative success initially. So
Mhm.
like I think they kind of jumped on the, oh, he's gonna make it bandwagon. And they've always been supportive of what I've done. So like I was lucky enough to have that supportive family. But again, they were like, oh, he's gonna make it, and like blah
Yeah.
blah blah. So they were cool at first, but I think around like when I was like 26, 27, still trying to do that,
Yeah.
they started it kind of wear on them a little bit. They're like, all right, man.
Which is so funny because, like, you think about it, 26 is young.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it is.
you're not a has-been at that point. So,
No.
but at the same time, you understand where families are coming from. Like, especially, you have a very great family, very career oriented. So I'm
Mhm.
sure they were looking at this young guy who had this path and now he's on this one. It's like, bro, when is it going to come to fruition
And
here?
so and because of that, not necessarily pressure from my family, but like the feeling that I felt of disappointment or disappointing them,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I got to go get a career, right?
Yep.
Well, all I knew was bars and restaurants. So that's when I started like managing restaurants and then moving my way up that corporate ladder,
Hmm.
which from on paper looks better, but your hours are the same. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? All like it's
Except maybe your stress level is higher
way
because now
higher.
you're having to manage other people who are wilding out, like more or
Exactly.
less.
And exactly. And so like that stress level was higher and I was playing less music. So like I
Mm.
kind of bounced back and forth from the music to the bars like for a good probably 10 years of
Oh,
going back and
wow.
forth which one I was going to try to make money on, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's two totally different things. You have your creative side, but then you
Mhm.
have your thinking side, and you're
Yes.
trying to go back and forth between both. I mean, I struggle with that too. Like when I'm in create mode, I don't want to think about this shit,
Yeah.
but sometimes you got to do both.
And that was the biggest hassle because to your point, like my creative side came at 2:30, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, you know.
Yeah.
And then having to get up at 8 to go open the restaurant, you're like, man, this is like it's draining on both ends. So that's
Yeah.
why that ping pong game back and forth of
Mm.
which one I was going to stick to. And then the family started being like, all right, dude, like
Yeah.
what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You're in your now
Mm.
I was in my 30s by this point, you
Mm.
know, and I've bounced around from Florida to Alabama to North Carolina, South Carolina, to like I've gone all the circuit, you know.
Wow.
And I think by that time my family was just like, well, okay, like whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then I ended up in Jacksonville and my best friend was working a construction job. And at that point, I mean, I couldn't even hold a hammer,
Mm.
you know? And so he got me a job working at this marine construction job. And so I started working there. And in a year, we started our own company doing that.
Construction.
Yeah, so I was doing now I'm building bar
Yeah. Talk about a big pivot.
yeah, and
You
I
went from using your brains and your creativity to manual labor.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like in between that time, and we can go all the way back, but like I mean I did scuba dive into construction, did the
Oh,
bar
wow.
stuff. I kind of bounced around a little bit, but when I was in Jacksonville, we decided that we wanted to do EMT fire school. And so we did that, but then the fire department decided they weren't going to hire me because of my tattoos.
Uh, I
Yeah.
think they've changed since then, but well, I mean, I don't
Well,
know.
so like
To
so
some degree in some
some a
counties.
lot of counties do, right? Like if
Yeah.
they accept it because you see firefighters, they have them all the time.
Yeah.
But long story short is the Jacksonville Fire Department, a guy on the department got like a Mike Tyson tattoo and they couldn't fire him. So they're like, okay, well, now no new firefighters can have visible tattoos, hand, neck, or
Oh,
face. I happen to have all of them. So
yeah. And lasering is just
no, I
like
wasn't going to do that.
painful, expensive, and you still see the
Exactly.
remnants of it. So it's not like it totally goes away.
And I was like, I'm wearing gloves, whatever, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So then this was a couple of years back. And so then I decided to move out here. And they're like, all right, what are you going to do for a career? And I was like, well, I could go back to music. I'm like, and then I applied at Pebble Beach and got that job.
Mm.
So I was working for a couple of restaurants there, and then that stress came back. But this time I didn't have that creative outlet because I just stopped playing music.
Whole new
A
group, whole
whole
new
new group,
people. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
On top of that, I was also not working out,
Yeah.
not doing that, not taking care of myself, and it all just kind of came to a head. Like you you have to have an outlet no matter what you're doing, you know,
Yeah.
and
Something you love
something
that feeds your soul.
exactly. And
Yeah.
like those 4 rooms we talk about in Elevate, like the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual rooms. I don't even know if I was entering in any of them, you
Yeah.
know, at any like at all. And I was literally just working and isolating, working and isolating. And then when I would go out, it would be like I would go crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Woo, let's go. Like I
Yeah.
had a day off or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just came to a head. And unfortunately for me, it came at 35 when I wish it would have came more at 25. But I'm resilient that way, I suppose. But
Hey, it's better than 65.
no, exactly, right. And I'm very blessed because of the fact, and this is what I attribute so much to Elevate with the physical part,
Yeah.
because like I don't feel 37 now. Like I just don't. I feel I'm in the best shape that I've been since I was like 20 years old.
When
Yeah,
you were in football shape.
when I was in football shape.
Yeah.
And it happened so quick too,
Yeah.
because like the belief starts coming back. You're like doing things that like are beneficial. You're going into all four of those rooms daily.
Yeah.
And so to be able to do that, it was like the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, you know? And that's why I decided to stay, because I had the job still at Pebble Beach, and an amazing company, great insurance, great benefit. Like that place was incredible to me.
Yeah.
But like there was something about it that like, I just wasn't done yet, like with this personal journey, you know, like
Absolutely.
trying to figure out a way to meet myself again. And like one of the scariest things was when what was the doctor's name that came? Um
Oh, Dr. Rob.
Dr. Rob. This guy's awesome.
Meet Dr. Rob. Yeah.
So when he came and he was talking about looking at yourself in the mirror, I like for 10 years I would like walk into my bathroom and the light would be off
Yeah.
and I wouldn't turn it on. Like I couldn't visually see that guy. And when he said that, it resonated so much to me. Like that was now my goal, to be able to do that again.
Mm.
And it took weeks, you know, but I was able to do it. And as soon as that happened, everything switched. And that's when I was like, this
Mm.
is what I'm supposed to be doing, not just for me, but to now help other people get through this, you know?
Yeah.
And like, cause I think people that go into treatment have a bad rap in the sense of like, they're a drug addict or they're an alcoholic or whatever their thing is, you know?
Yeah.
I think that to label that, there's so much, they're still like a human being, and the best people I've ever met was at Elevate, and the
Absolutely.
strongest people I've ever met are at Elevate, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I like to think like we're almost better off than your average person because we were confronted with such diversity, force or not diversity, adversity, where we had to like redo our whole lives. That a lot of people who've, not run into those kind of problems, maybe they skate across the surface, like everything's kind of easy, goes right, no stress. Like their medium is like this, whereas ours is like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And to overcome that and then spend that time working on yourself. And like what you notice, it doesn't end for us, like when we finish the program. Now it's like integration into life. You've got all these tools, but now that was just like one layer of the onion. Now let's keep going further and further.
100%. That's the best part. Is
Yeah.
like staying the 3 months of training was the best thing I ever did. In
Yeah.
the sense of like, I have the tools now for like that I learned. I had all the mindfulness stuff and all of that. And now I get the opportunity to actually implement it in my life while still being in an environment that like utilizes that every day. So
Yeah.
not only was I forced to, but like it was just around me. So I wanted to surround myself with like-minded people, right? Like to be able to have that in my life.
Yeah. Where else can you go to work and at dinner break? It's like CrossFit staff class.
Yes.
Like free there, leading from the front, from the clients, from us. Like it's such a cool thing that I think clients can take it for granted, but like it's like literally laid out right there. You have no excuses. It's like
No.
literally leave that room and walk into the gym.
And that's what was missing, like for me, was not just the structure aspect of it, but like there's the accountability to that structure. Like
Yeah.
you don't sit there and hold a gun to us and say you have to do CrossFit at 5.
Yeah.
But like there is a level of like, okay, like I have to go to this class, not like for an accountability, because like we respect each other as humans. So you're gonna call me out if you see me walk past the gym, right? So, but like to have
Yeah.
that structure there, I don't know that I don't even know 2 years in if I would be mentally strong enough to drive to a CrossFit gym after I got off of work at a normal job, if you will, you know?
Right. Or get up at 4 a.m. so you can get it in.
I know I
work.
wouldn't do that. Right.
Cold and dark. And yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
But to have that, like to eliminate the
Mhm.
excuses
Mhm.
and have it all laid out there, it's mind blowing to me that like more people don't do it, but like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But like that's for one of the best parts about it. Like even on the hard days when I'm like, man, this sucks, and not with the CrossFit, but like with the job itself, because it can be stressful, right?
Super
As
stressful.
you know better than most.
Absolutely.
So there's some days where you're like, I'm not going to do this. Like I'm just going to go go somewhere else or whatever.
Mhm.
And then the CrossFit is like, no, dude, like that's one of the accountability things that you said you're going to do. So you got to go do it. And
Yeah.
by the time you're done with the exercise, you're like, man, this place is great. I love
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, I feel fine. What was that about before? I don't even fucking know. Endorphins are
Exactly.
going, did lift some heavy weights, feeling pretty good.
Exactly. Like,
I mean, just seeing the transformation in you in this last year, it's been mind blowing. You've lost so much weight. You've
mhm.
gotten so strong. You're front of the pack on all the workouts. Like it's been amazing to witness.
Well, I appreciate it. And like, I attribute a lot of it to you and Tots, obviously, like, because again, there's that accountability. But then, like, because Greg does it every day with me, Andrew does it the days that he's there every day with me. And so to have those guys there too, we help push each other,
Yeah.
and like, it's the best thing that's happened to me, like getting back in that gym. Cause like, I was 300 pounds when I got there in Elevate, 297, and I'm 225 now. And like looking back at like old photos of me, I'm like, who the hell
Yeah.
was this guy? And
Well, and the coolest part about that is you did it in a healthy way, right?
yeah,
You didn't like yo-yo diet. You didn't, take a bunch of stuff. You like earned it the right way. So it wasn't just a fad that as soon as you let go a little bit, all of a sudden it came back. You've literally changed your lifestyle and your health style where this is the new normal.
well, and it is because if there is a day that I don't do CrossFit, I hate it. Like I
Yeah.
hate that day. And it goes back to even not just being on CrossFit, like even mindfulness. Like
Yeah.
I have such a routine now that if there's a day that I skip mindfulness in the morning, like I'm busy, blah blah blah,
Hmm.
I'll be like 2 3 hours into my day and I'm like, what? I don't like something's,
Yeah.
and so all those things that have been implemented into my daily habit.
Isn't that crazy? Like as we become more tuned to our physical body, our spiritual body, when one of those fall out, like for me, like the physical part, it took my son going like, dude, when was the last time you worked out? And this was a few years ago. And I'm
Mhm.
like, God, it's actually been like, several days or a week. He's like, you need to get in that gym. And I'm like, oh my God. The fact that he's noticing that, but like to your point, even the physical, the spiritual, like same thing. If I don't do my breathing or my mindfulness, I'll feel it later on. And so, like you said, check with rooms. Is it my physical? Did I eat like crap? Did I do something? Did I veer away from my diet? Did I not work out? Did I not pray? Did I not do mindfulness? Like at least now we have the list to go down and go, oh yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, you got to check in, right?
Yeah, instead of like, I just feel super depressed and I don't know why. It's like, well, no, you know why. Let's
Exactly.
confront it and then let's change it.
Exactly. And like that's the best part about the physical room though, for me at least, and I know it's probably similar for you.
Mhm.
That room influences the other three more so
Yeah.
than the one room, any other rooms for the rest of the three, but you have to have all four.
Yep.
And so like as soon as I started recognizing like my emotional regulation when I started working out, because I would just like get pissed for no reason and not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Or like mentally, like I just didn't have motivation to read or motivation to go back to school or do any of those things. I'll just be like, screw it.
Yeah.
And then obviously the spiritual realm, I think in the case of a lot of people, but especially for me, it was like the last thing I thought about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I put too much stress on what spirituality meant. Like I thought it was just God, or I thought it was going to
Yeah.
church.
It had to look a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't. And like that was another really great thing I learned about.
Were you raised really religious?
No, my parents definitely are religious, but they're more of the autonomy thing for the kids. Like, if you want to get baptized, then you do it yourself. If
Smart,
you want to go, then you go do it. Like, we have our beliefs, and I really respected that.
for sure.
But I was also the youngest, so I got away with everything. I mean,
Yeah.
so like, I just didn't do anything.
And they didn't notice they were
They're
so
like, it
over it by
doesn't
then.
matter.
Yeah.
Like, he's fine or
Yeah.
whatever.
He's on the hospital. He's
Yeah.
not evicted from school. Fine. He's
Yeah,
good.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I was kind of able to just kind of skate by on a lot of those things.
Mm,
And I look back on now, obviously I shouldn't have done that, but it made me who I am now. So I'm
sure.
happy with it. But
Yeah.
spirituality now means a lot more. Like my wife is a principal at a Christian school. We
Mm,
go to the church on Sundays. And
nice.
I've always had a relationship for me like with God, but like I just never knew what it looked like. And again, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. So how in the world am I going to have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then there was always like this anger that I had with my spirituality, and like kind of back up the story again. So as a kid, like my parents worked all the time. My dad's a chiropractor and he just started his business
Mm,
like when I was a little kid. And so like my brother watched me, right? Well, so from 2 to 12, there was all sorts of like bad, real bad emotional sexual abuse, and like of the worst kind, you know? And I didn't obviously understand it as a kid, but as I got older, I did, right?
Mhm.
And so like that relationship with God was always like a fuck you,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then that turned into I'm going to do things my way. That's where like the rebelliousness kicked in. Well, again, once football was removed, now I'm like, well, you took that away too? Like, fuck you, right?
Yeah.
And so then that was like where spirituality like was discontinued as far as like gratitude, all that thing, all those spirituality, gratitude, thankfulness, all that went out the window.
Yep.
And it all turned like, I'm going to do this my way or the highway. And
Yeah. Well, and as a lot of us learn, there's an easy way to deal with it. It's called not dealing with it.
yes,
And that's where drinking and drugs and everything comes into play. And that's,
absolutely.
we all pick one things I mean, I've always known, but I've really realized is traumatic shit happens to all of us as kids. And
Yeah.
it's like how we learn to overcome it. And for some of us, it was drugs and alcohol. The way we overcame it was not thinking about it and diving deeper into that.
And like anything you can do to not think about it.
Yep.
It for me, it was like I had to avoid this at all costs. One, I never told anybody,
Yep.
including my family. Right. And so I would not go to family functions. I would not be around anybody.
Mm.
Christmas, I was hello, goodbye. But again, I was the youngest, so they were just like, "What? As long as he's not dead, we're fine."
Yeah.
And that wasn't them neglecting it. I think that was like I put on this persona, like I wasn't going to be around my family, and they were like okay with it to an extent, you know.
Because they didn't understand why. If they understood why, maybe
100%.
they would start asking questions, but they just thought, ah, it's just who he is or how he is.
Exactly. And like once I came and explained to
Mm.
them everything that happened,
So you did.
yeah, so that
What caused you to get to that
my
point?
sister started having kids.
Mm.
And again, so he was my brother, right? So like once my sisters started having their children, like I was like, all right, like I know I can handle this burden myself and what happened to me as a kid. Well, that's what I thought. Obviously,
Yeah.
that's a different story, but I thought I could handle it. And I was like, but there's no way that I could live with
Mm.
myself if it happened to them, you know, my nieces and nephews. And so I ended up coming out and talking to my sisters about it and all that. And then,
That's pretty heavy, though.
yeah, it was
I
nuts.
can only imagine their reactions. And then now you're almost responsible for getting them through that.
Yeah, it's kind it was a lot, you know,
Yeah.
and especially like it because I was like 24, 25 when I came out and told them all that. And so there was a lot of years in between that. And again, he was a part of their lives this whole time too. So
Yeah.
like imagine like your best friend or like, you know, he was
Mhm.
Uncle Robbie, like the whole deal.
Yeah. And you weren't doing all the best things. So I'm sure they were looking
Yeah,
at you
I
and your
wasn't even
reputation going, hmm.
well, so with that exact point, my
Yeah.
sister who I ended up telling first, she's a cop
Mm.
and her husband's a cop. So what is the first thing they do? They're like, all right, come with me.
Ah.
And I had to go to the police station
Ah.
and they wired my phone and they had me call them.
No way.
Yeah. And so I called them and the detective, now they couldn't be in the room. There was a different detective there. And so he sat there and we had the conversation and with my brother on the phone. And obviously he didn't know they were there or
And
listening.
he just openly confessed.
100%.
Wow.
And here was the craziest thing is so we obviously were able to hear it back after. I didn't really recognize it or notice it when it was happening because I knew who he was.
Yeah.
They didn't know who he really was. And so his tone was so like unempathetic, right? Like it was just like you were describing like what you ate for lunch today. Like there was just
Yeah.
like no emotion in it.
Yeah.
And there was no sorries, there was no nothing. It was so nonchalant.
Yeah. Just cold.
And it was cold, right? And
Yeah.
so they obviously heard this coming straight from his mouth. So then the whole family found out and we all had, you know, talked about it and stuff like that. So
So were there charges filed or it was just like the truth was out and
the truth was out there. So my theory at the time, because again, this was a big like shock for everybody. And now
sure.
I'm redigging this up too. So
Yeah.
at the time, my theory was the punishment would be the family. He can no longer be a part of the family.
Yeah.
So I've taken my mom away from him, the kids, all that stuff. So in my head,
Yeah.
that was justice for me at the time. So no charges were like ever brought up or anything like that. Just publicly known was, in my opinion, good enough for me, you
Sure.
know. And but yeah.
That had to be difficult to navigate too, because again, you're talking about emotion, something you've dealt with your whole life. And now here it is, the truth. And it's like, cool, but that doesn't really resolve the emotions of what you went through with all that toxicity for all that time.
No, nothing
Yeah.
helped,
Yeah.
right? Like moving around, going to job, like because we always have this like
Mm.
you hear it a lot is like the grass is greener on the other side. Like, oh, if I can just go to Tennessee,
Yeah.
then it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, I went to Tennessee and it came with me, right?
Yeah. Well, there's that old adage, no matter where you go, there you are.
Exactly.
And you attract the people that you're like. So it's like, I did the same thing. I moved around. I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, it's so weird. I just keep finding people like me. It's like, well, duh.
Yeah,
You attract what you are.
that's
So
exactly what happened.
yeah.
Everywhere I went, there I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And so, and that phrase never made sense to me until recently, right? Like
Yeah.
elevate. And I'm like, oh, in order to change, you have to change everything about you,
Yeah.
not just like your location.
Yeah. Yeah, I would find myself hitching myself to people who were doing really good. I'm like, or dating them, like, oh, as long as I'm with this good person, then I
Yeah.
can keep being bad. It's like, no,
Yep.
you're gonna burn that bridge. It's all, yeah, gonna fall apart. And yeah, just surrounding yourself with good people isn't always like the solution either. You literally have to change yourself.
You have to change everything,
Yeah.
absolutely everything. And that's when I came out here. That was another one. Like I was
Yeah.
like, okay, now I can't be a firefighter in Florida. Like I just did all this shit. I'm like, again, fuck you, right?
Yep.
So then when I came out here, there was something. I think there's something magical about this area in the an aura about it.
For sure.
Um, and then my family out here, my cousin, who's basically like my oldest sister, we're just really close. Her and her husband, and then her husband's mom and aunt, and we're all really close. And they could sense something was not there, and they knew about the past, and they could just sense. They're just like, "Yo, bro,
Mm.
like enough's enough.
Yeah.
You need to go figure this trauma out.
Yeah.
Or you go
Well, it's
deal with
hard to
it."
watch that with someone you love, and you
Yeah,
just see them self-sabotaging themselves.
yeah, and like in self sabotage, there's times when you know you're doing it,
Hmm.
and then majority of the time for me, I just had no idea I was actually doing it. I thought I was
Right.
doing the right thing. I thought everything was happening, but
Yeah.
like if I'm able to like zoom out and objectively view what I was doing, I was like, bro, you just fucking that shit up, man.
Well, thankfully, you had your family who hadn't seen you so intimately that when they saw it, they could
Yeah.
go, "Whoa,
Hmm.
what the heck's
And
happening
they could
here?"
tell like that, like just I think I was exhausted too, right?
Yeah.
Like there comes a point in the road where you're just like, dude, like
Yeah.
I can't keep doing this. Like so they were on board and they helped me through it. They did every step of the way as far as like
Mm.
figuring out a good place for me and all of this stuff because again, the trauma and not dealing with it was all of the was the source of majority of everything.
Yep.
And so when I got to Elevate and one of the very first like classes we had was it was just like discussing trauma. And one of the things that I had in my mind was no one's going to understand me. There's no like no one's going to be able to fix me. I'm too fucked up,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. And like the most interesting thing about trauma is we all have it. It's just yours may look different than mine or will look different than mine.
Yep.
And so it's not as on this grand scale or you know what I'm saying? Like there's way worse,
Totally.
way less, but ultimately it all affects us the same.
Yep.
And
Trauma is trauma.
trauma is
For
trauma.
some people, like I've talked about this before, it's just not just, it's a divorce, or they moved when you were
Yeah.
young and you lost all your friends, or it could be shit like what you dealt with
Hmm.
or I dealt with that is so beyond that, but it still registers the same with the
Yeah, your
person,
body or
regardless.
mind or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it reacts very similarly,
Yep.
right? And so that was a really big realization for me
Mm.
because like I thought I was the most broken one in the room. And what I didn't realize was that was also my ego saying that too. Because your
Yeah.
ego is saying you're the greatest or you're the worst.
Yeah.
And my mine has said both very often, like in my younger days. And
Yeah.
I had to be able to like destroy that. And the best way I was able to do that was my cell phone was taken away from me.
Yep.
I had to sit on a porch for like 2, 3 days, just like thinking with my own thoughts, which was the first time I've done that. And I can't tell
Mm.
you how long.
Yeah.
And then being in rooms with other people that like have gone through similar traumas and or just experiencing life for the first time without any distraction. And I was able to finally have like an ego death, like, oh, bro, you done fucked up. Like you here now.
I love that term you just used, ego death.
I was 100%. That was what it was. And
Yeah.
I've had multiple,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Same.
and I've had them throughout my life. I just never identified it as that, nor did recognized it really. But
Yeah.
when I started training, I had even more of them. And like when becoming a staff member, I think I have them more frequently,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Well, especially for you, because everything always came so easy for you.
mhm.
It was like you just tried it. Now I'm a singer. Great.
Yep.
There was not a ton of effort in
Yeah.
it. And so when you're hit with something where it's like you're not instantly an ace, it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. And that was literally my whole life, right? It's
Yeah.
like luck just happened, or like stuff just like I wasn't the best singer at all. I could like I'm a good guitar player, but I'm not a great guitar player. But I was always like near someone that was great, so I was able to kind of piggyback, or like
Yep.
everything was always that way. To your point,
Yeah.
and I was always able to play that ace, and like, oh man, eventually you run out of cards,
Yes.
and you just do.
But that's when living starts,
It,
because you're not just
100%.
like going, yeah, that's where, and like we talk about, where it becomes really uncomfortable, that's where the growth is. If
Yeah.
it's easy, there's no growth.
Mm.
It's just like you're just flitting through life like no big deal. But when there's adversity and it's hard, that's where we grow.
And like to enjoy the process.
Yeah.
Like I always fucking hated that. Like
Yeah.
watching people be like, "Oh man, you gotta trust the process,
Yeah.
enjoy the
It's the
process."
journey, it's not the
Yeah, it's a
destination.
journey. I'm like, "Oh, dude, that sucks." Who
Yeah.
wants, like
Yeah.
from a like a spectator, you're like, I don't want to see Kobe practice basketball. I want to see the highlights of his game. And that's how you kind of view life, is like just
Mhm.
highlights. Like, oh, all I got to do is that, and it's good.
Yeah.
But you have to like go through the shit. And going through the shit, I was able to start recognizing like, oh, this is actually the best part.
Yeah.
It really is. Like understand, like getting to know yourself, crying, all those moments. Like when I think back of
Yeah.
like my biggest growth moments, if you will, like it was when it was the worst.
Yeah. But it's also being in the right place where you can have that without feeling judged or punized, impunized, whatever that word is, or penalized for having these emotions. Because especially for men, that's not like truly acceptable, not that it's like a bad thing. It's actually a great thing, but you guys have to, I don't want to say front. You have to protect yourselves, because if
Yeah.
if one man sees another man break down, they're like, "Damn, what a pussy!" It almost loses your posturing in whatever environment you're in. So to be in an environment where everybody can be vulnerable and safe, nobody wants anything from each other. It's just to share your emotions, and that's it. It's crazy.
And like, well, that was the manliest shit I ever did, was cry
Yeah.
in front of people.
Yeah.
And that was a shift in perspective too.
Yeah.
Where like as before, I'm like, yo, man, like I
Yeah.
played football, like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Like I had this construction company, like
All manly shit.
all this testosterone vibe.
Totally. High T, as tough.
High T. Yeah, he's got low T top. And so like that ability to break down and cry,
Yeah.
and that ability to like be vulnerable in front of people is the manliest shit that
Yeah.
I've ever done.
Totally.
And it's interesting to now be able to be a staff member and to be a counselor there, and to watch people, because you can see yourself in others,
Yeah.
and to watch people like go through the same stages that you did in the same process,
Yeah.
and then to watch them finally like not break but break, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yes, like, and you can tell the change, like you can see it like energy wise, you can see it in their face, you can see it in like everything that they do from that moment forward. Like it's like that was the aha or the breaking moment for them.
I love that. And it's so hard to do, being vulnerable, because we're so used to guarding ourselves
Mhm.
because of our trauma and our past. And we've got to always have the wall up to finally let that down. It's amazing. It's a miracle, like you said.
Yeah, I wish now that I like have been in the Elevate community for almost 2 years, or yeah, it's going to be 2 years in April. I wish the world was more like that,
Yeah.
because like going out into the world, these normies, if you will, like there's oversharing, you know what I'm saying? Like you can like, or sometimes, and I hate to say this, but like sometimes even small talk with like a civilian, if you will,
Yeah.
is like the most painful experience of my life. I'm like, let's talk about your trauma, bro.
Yeah. Let's
Like,
get in there.
let's
Let's
get
talk
it.
about real shit,
Yeah,
man.
so real shit, like if I go to like a gathering with my wife or something,
Yeah.
like it's hard to be around people like that haven't gone on the same journey as you or are not in that environment,
Yeah.
because I've experienced so much awesomeness in the rooms. And
Yeah.
you know, again, like it's like, hey, what'd you do yesterday? It's like, let me to hear about your childhood, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Totally.
just want to get to
Yeah,
that
let's
stuff.
just get in there
Yeah.
because I can see it. So let's just talk about
Let's just get it out.
it. Yeah.
I don't care about your golf game, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, let's hear about your trauma.
Yeah, let's talk about why you missed that ball. Let's fix that back. Well, and that's the counselor in us, right? Like it's
100%.
like, and it's hard to shut that off ever because once you become that person and you can see it clearly, and we, you know, the great thing about the Elevate curriculum and learning is we don't tell people what their problem is. We lead them with
100%.
motivational interviewing and otherwise to figure it out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to break that habit when you see it work so beautifully every single time.
And it literally is batting 1,000,
Yeah.
right? And like that was when I first started counseling, one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on was I had this assumption that I had to be the one to like get it out of them.
Yeah.
And there was not only just resistance, but there was like an inauthentic vibe about it.
Yeah.
And so I think just instinctually I just said like stop talking and let them, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the biggest transitions for me as a PMC was like to be able to give them the autonomy 100%. And like you're saying, motivational interview and all that's great, but like they have to do it.
Yeah.
And like that's the coolest part to see it and like just to be able to step back.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the hardest things to learn as a counselor is just to hold space for people.
Yes.
You don't have to fix it. You don't have to say, maybe it's this. You don't have to lead them there. You just hold space and they
Yeah,
get there.
exactly.
And that's hard for a lot of people because, like you said, ego gets involved or their opinions or they want to be the one. And so I even see, you know, counselors make that mistake where they fall into that, where they're trying to fix somebody instead of just holding space and letting them figure it out.
That's why when we do the conscious recovery, is one of the shared agreements is no fixing. And why not? Because we're not broken.
Yeah.
Because we all have this feeling that like I want to get fixed, or this therapist needs to fix me, or I need to fix this or this and
Yeah.
that. And so we instinctually want to like once we feel fixed, we instinctually want to help others get fixed.
Yep.
And that's like initially that was really hard for me, that concept to grasp. I'm like, well, I did it. Like this is how you should do it. It's like
Yeah.
you can't do it that way. They have to do it too, just like you did it. You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's where the whole leading from the front comes from. You're not forcing it down everybody's throat. Like, here's how I did it. Here's how you're going to do it. You just do it. And everyone's like, oh, I want to be like that. I'm going to do those things just because you're leading by example, not forcing or dragging or pushing. You're just allowing them
Exactly.
to get there.
Well, that's one of the things that like I gravitated me towards you so much was like, I'm like, how often is a fucking CEO in here on a Tuesday night teaching CrossFit? Like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
And then Tots too, right? Like
Yeah.
teaching CrossFit. Like he doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's got kids and all this stuff, but like you guys putting in that time and effort, but also like you ain't just putting CrossFit on the wall and saying, all right, all the clients need to do CrossFit.
Yeah.
But you're actually like doing it. And that's what I loved about when I first started as a PMC, like Greg, Dana, and myself, like it was like, you know, the thing to do. And to that point of like leading from the front, I don't think there's another way to lead. Like, I don't think you can lead from the back.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are doing that, I think you're just doing a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And people may get in line because their jobs are on it, but they're not doing it because they believe in it or they, you know, they think it's actually going to work for them. They're doing it because they're being told to, and their livelihood is tied to it.
Yeah. Marching orders.
Yeah.
Right? Where like, I think Elevate's the first job I've ever had where when I wake up, I'm not like, oh, I have to go counsel people.
Yeah.
Or whatever, you know, like I have to go do this.
Yeah.
It's one of the very few places I've ever been where pretty much consistently it's like, dude, I get to like, I wonder how this person's doing today, or I wonder if this person's going to make that breakthrough today, or, you know, like I'm constantly like tuned into the community, which is, it's awesome. And it's because of that leading from the front, not the barking orders from behind, you know?
Totally. And I love so much hearing the shout outs for you guys.
Yeah.
Because they nail all those points. And you guys, not that we all seek acknowledgement or
Oh, it helps.
validation. Well, especially when you've had some particularly really hard ones. Those end up kind of being your favorites, right? The ones that were the tough cases that nobody could crack, or we didn't know, are they even going to
Yeah.
make it? Are they going to leave and never come back? And those are the ones when you see that kind of breakthrough, you're like, hell yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I do this shit.
And it's like the last graduation when like a couple of the clients, we have a new PMC and a couple of clients started shouting her name out.
Yeah.
And you could see her entire like,
Yeah.
because she is proud of it because it's not an easy gig working to help others. Like
Oh, yeah.
it's obviously mentally exhausting. So
Well, and because even though you've done your work, it can still trigger you
yes.
because that they're going through similar things. And when you did that, this happened. It's like to set all that aside and just be there for somebody. It's not that easy. It's
Mm-mm.
not like a door you can just shut and say, okay, now I'm 100% here for you. Now we learned how to do that, but it can still, especially new in recovery and everything, it's triggering.
It's the secondhand trauma. When I was a trainee,
Mm,
especially like there was a few moments where I was like, "Oh no,"
yeah.
like there's a like I could just feel those emotions coming up. But again, that's where the growth came. Like
Yep.
that's when all that started happening. And what I remember being frustrated at first. I'm like, "Why is no one helping me with this? Why is
Yep.
And I had to start again going to that realization of like, dude, nobody's coming. Like this is you. Like it's up to
Yeah.
you right now.
Ah,
And like that was really hard because going through it, you're almost catered, right? Like
yep.
you're everything's laid out for you, but once you start training, it's like, all right, you're back in the real world to an extent. And like to be able to this is now you have to do this. It was the first time like being an adult, if you will. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like that was
You got to advocate for yourself. No one
100%.
else is going to do it for
No one's
you.
gonna do it. And like it took me 35 years to realize that. I ran out of cards. I
Yeah.
was, you know what I mean? And it took me 35 years to figure out, like, all right, this is you now. Like you're gonna have to figure it out.
Well, and it'll probably come again because one thing I've learned from
Yeah.
my age is, oh, I handled that. And then it'll crop up 10 years later in a different form just to test you to see. And even things like that, advocating for yourself, especially in our line of business, because we're so into almost sacrificing for others because we get such passion and like fulfillment of helping others. But we can take it to the extreme where now we're not thinking about ourselves anymore because it's much easier to think about everybody else.
As, like the boundaries is huge because
Huge.
it can honestly it can sometimes feel like okay this feels really good to help this person or
Yeah.
this it feels good to help others so you do extend yourself almost too much sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
and that oxytocin is amazing.
yeah, it's like oh dude this is awesome, they're
Yeah.
asking me for help,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
great. And like I remember one time it was about 6 months or 7 months back and we just started the staff CrossFit class. And one of the trainees like came up to me and was like asking me like advice, while the class was starting.
Yep.
And she was asking me about like some advice with her kids and her baby daddy and all this stuff. And I remember she walked away and you walked up to me like quietly. You're like, yo, man, you got to get some boundaries here. And like at first it didn't click in my head. I was like, oh, she's just asking for advice. But then I realized I'm like, you're right. Like this is my time. I have to, in order to help her out later, I
Yeah.
have to be able to be here today. And that was another great lesson. So like those happen to your point all the time,
Yeah.
but you have to be looking for them too. Cause if you just let them pass by,
Yeah. Well, and it can come from everywhere. It can happen there. It can happen at home. It can happen with your family.
Mhm.
And it's layers, because they all have past and trauma. And so you think you've handled all the shit, and then your family will bring up something, and you're like, dude, not
There-
that person anymore, man.
no, there's always something.
Yeah. There's always something, always from somewhere. That
It's
never changes.
when I first started leading meditation groups, we would go outside and like, all right, everyone be quiet, right? And like just try to be still. And like there was always this damn crow outside of the facility. And he
Yep.
would always just drive me nuts.
Yeah.
And so for like 2, 3 weeks, I was like, man, that fucking crow, dude. Like I need to do something about this guy. But then there was a lesson in that. And now I
For
use
sure.
that to this day. I'm like, there's always a crow, man.
Yep.
And then how are you going to handle like again, I'm trying to sit there being quiet and there's just a right. But there's always that, no
Yeah.
matter how hard you try to get away from it. So you just have to deal with it. You have to sit through it.
Yeah, because there is no perfect
No.
circumstances or environment. Like, and that's the beauty of learning how to find that comfort in the discomfort, because it's never going to be, at least not for us, like not the path that we chose, problem free. That just doesn't
Mhm.
exist. So we got to work for it, and we got to learn to navigate that shit, and then lean into it and make it our superpower.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like to be able to I don't know. You brought up superpower a bunch of times, like in my early journey here.
Yeah.
And I was like, this fucking lady has no idea what a superpower is. You know what I mean? Like, because I was putting superpower as like an
Yeah.
unobtainable thing that you see in like a Marvel movie or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then I started like recognizing like this is a superpower because like people don't have this. Like they don't have this opportunity.
Yeah.
And so once you start like taking advantage of it, then it really does become
Yeah.
that.
Well, and then people start coming to you for that because now you have fully become that. That's what you're going to attract is people who need that help from you,
Mm-hmm.
which can get exhausting too, because you're like, damn, dude, can I get a little bit of a break? Because now everyone's like, I want what they have. And so proximity and all of that stuff, strangers, like, fully just confessing everything within 5 minutes. And they're like, why am I telling you that? And you're like, I don't know, man. It's my thing. It's cool.
It can become exhausting like that. Being able to put up those boundaries though, and
Yeah.
not just at work but like in your personal life and even at my house, like
Yeah.
my wife and I got married in September, so like having an early relationship, you're still kind of navigating,
Sure.
and like living together, you're trying to navigating like time. Am I spending too much time with her or whatever? And I think it just got to a point where I'm like, all right, I have to put up certain time frames where I need to be by myself, and she does the same thing. And I think it's
Yeah.
important in your personal life, at work, on the streets, like anything that you're doing, like you need to have those boundaries to be able to set up for
Absolutely.
yourself.
Well, and I think people overcoming addiction, we just have this propensity towards codependence. It just is what it is, whether it's with the drug, the alcohol, the people, the things there, it is codependence and breaking that chain to create, our independence. Yes, we love each other, but yes, we also still need our space. And yes,
Mhm.
we're in love, but we don't need to spend every moment together.
Yeah, the introvert extrovert. Like you
Yeah.
think you're such an extrovert, but you're like, oh, I think I might be an introvert.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you see it like when clients first get their cell phone taken away,
Mm.
they don't have that, this or whatever. They don't have that outlet.
Yeah.
So their mind, they can't be quiet. Like they don't want their mind to be still or quiet. So they're like, and what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just see him bouncing from person to person. You're like, he's gonna tucker himself out sooner than later, but you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, it was funny last night at CrossFit, and because there was a bunch of new clients, and I
Mhm.
hadn't coached in a couple weeks because of our annuals. I did a get to know you little question, and one of the things I said, what are you going to do this year that's uncomfortable, but you're going to commit to? We already did, New Year's resolutions and whatever that was, and one of the clients, one of the girls was like, I am going to learn how to communicate to the degree that needs communication, not too little, but not too much.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, but it was like a big moment for her because because of that community, became self aware of this isn't too much and too little is not like the best thing. So why don't we be mindful and think about things before we're just running our mouths or secluding and not talking to anybody? Let's find that happy balance.
What an amazing thing to say, by the way,
Yeah.
for a client to say.
Self awareness like
That's
no
awesome.
other.
Because I think that's like true with anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously we talk about like there's too much sharing, or like
Yeah.
if, and I'll bring like my relationship back up. Like if I'm upset but I don't tell her, that's just as bad as not. So you have
100%.
to be able to find the balance. But sometimes saying the thing right then isn't the best attribute, like or
Totally.
or like not allowing them the space to be able to say their thing too.
Right.
But communicating when communication is necessary is a really valuable skill for
Yeah,
sure.
effectiveness. And exactly what you were saying. Like I went through this with my daughter where she would just be in the worst mood and it would ruin everything. And I'm like trying to figure it out. What did I do? What did she do? Like, and then after the fact, like months later, she's like, oh, well, I was going through a breakup at that point in time. And it's like, bro, why didn't you just fucking tell me? I would have given you like the space and the
Yeah.
whatever you needed, but that not trusting me to communicate just and left me trying to figure out what the heck it was.
And like so it goes right back to not telling my family about all that stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Like I robbed them of 12, 15 years or whatever it was of them being able to help,
Yeah.
of like, or like that communication there, because I chose not to say anything for so long.
You couldn't heal
I
together.
couldn't heal together because like, it happened to me physically, but it's happening to all of them too emotionally.
Yeah.
And to rob them of that was a big, like, for me, I felt really guilty about that,
Yeah.
like so I think it's extremely important to like advocate for yourself and say what's on your mind, especially the people close to you, but know when to say it
Yes.
and how to say it. And that was
Yeah.
like a really key point of the curriculum, was the communication aspect of it.
Yeah.
And like everyone knows how to communicate, and we use that, we use communication as just being able to talk.
Yes.
But there's social media, there's this and that, so we all think we're communicating, but we're not. We're just
Right.
spewing bullshit. But in order to like properly communicate and allow space for both people is a skill, and some people have it, and we both know people who don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad that's a part of our program because without effective communication, like when they leave, how are they going to set boundaries with the ones they love? Take ownership for what they did. And that's why I love the first thing you do is rebuild trust by basically confessing some of the shit that you've been doing.
Hmm.
But that opens the door for healing. So now you can have effective communication when you got to put those boundaries in, or here's what I need, or here's what this will look like going forward. It's
Absolutely.
empowering. And without that skill, everybody's just living in the past.
Yeah, and it's, you're never done learning it,
Right. Ever.
ever. And like, because it's ever evolving, and because you are as a person evolving, and so is the other person, and they're it's such a crucial skill, man. And like I've
Yeah.
learned so much as a client, as a trainee, then as a staff member, now as a husband, as like all these things, because the dynamic changes, and so you have to be able to adapt your communication style to each situation.
Right.
Whereas before, it was a blanket statement, or like I was just the same person with everybody. It's like you can't do that, man. Like you have to understand how to properly communicate to each individual as well.
Yeah. What would you say in your work as a PMC? Is there a certain point in the program you see that light bulb go on, or does it happen at any part in the program? And some people it doesn't come on till the end, or is there one part of the program where you're like every time this is the one that gets them?
I wish it was every time this is what
Yeah,
gets
it's
them. I
never that
really
way.
do wish it was.
Yeah.
Now there is like a overall average I would see. Like so phase 2 and 3, it's right around that communication time. But there's the 3 blocks of observations that we do, the objective observations.
Yeah.
And around that time frame, because it's also around like the 30-day period where people start to kind of, the lights start to turn on a little brighter.
Yeah.
But it's around that time when you start viewing things more objectively instead of allowing your emotions to view them for you.
Yeah.
And like, because I used to think, like when I'd view an object, like that's not what I want it to be, so I'm
Mhm.
going to change it in like the narrative, whatever the situation is, so it's something that I enjoy watching
Yeah.
rather than just seeing it for what it is. And so around that time frame is when a lot of people start to kind of come over that hill.
Yeah.
But I think it attributes to both the communications, that exercise, and then like that 30-day mark is kind
Mhm.
of again like where the lights start coming on a little brighter.
Yeah.
But there are some difficult ones now.
Oh yeah.
And there are some difficult ones where it's like almost like the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
And I think the most growth happens those 2 weeks.
It is.
And like the light bulb may come be on or whatever. But like the last couple weeks are the most important in my opinion.
Yeah.
And because that's when you see the most growth of the individual. Like you start seeing people be less concerned with like, we don't get a whole lot of social time, but like the times that they're out, everyone's like, hey guys, how's your day? Blah blah blah. Like you kind of see them like start taking their demeanor more serious. And like it's almost like that's when they like grow into adulthood, if you will. Like it's
Yeah.
like that's different vibe that they have.
They're like 18, getting ready to graduate high school, and they're like, okay, now I'm going to be an adult. I get
Exactly.
it.
And like that's when I see the most growth though. That's the coolest stage too, because I think ultimately they're calmer
Yeah.
in their demeanor, like, and they're starting to do their exit strategy. So like the real life is happening at the same
Yeah.
time as all this. I think the program is designed perfectly in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
I've seen enough people go through, I've counseled enough people go through to have a pretty objective opinion. I don't know of like a better way to walk someone through any of this.
Yeah.
I just don't think there is one.
No. Well, and especially because like that latter half is where they're writing up their transgressions and making amends. Someone brand new, If we were to hit them with that right away, they're still almost in that victim place where they're not seeing their accountability. I only hurt myself. I don't know why I'm here. There's almost like this rebelliousness that it takes getting that far along before they can truly honestly look at it and take accountability for what they did to create that. It
Absolutely.
wasn't done to them. They created it, but that's not something you can hit them straight out the gate with.
No, because they got to go through that ego death,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I know I did.
Yeah.
Like there was a long period of time, not a long, but like in the perspective of me being there as a client, there was a period of time where I was very much so I don't need to be here.
Yep.
And I was a grumpy bear.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
pissed.
Not like all these other people.
No.
They're way worse than I was. Oh yeah.
And like so I was just this angry, resentful, pointed a lot of fingers. And I think that's a natural reaction, right? Like
For sure.
like nobody wants to be in trouble, or no one wants to be put in a situation where they feel all these feelings at once.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely correct. Like if we were to hit them with all of that in the beginning, I think it would be a disaster. But
Yeah.
it is set up perfectly because the mindfulness workbook early on,
Yeah.
like you learn about mindfulness. And I remember when I first started and they were like, all right, here's this mindfulness workbook. I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna be fucking eating granola and going to fights. You know what I mean? I'm like, this fucking California
This hippie shit
shit,
out here.
Santa Cruz.
Yep.
I was like, God, no, someone save me. I really was. I was so pissed.
Yeah.
But like, because again, the reason why I was pissed, that was a defense mechanism because I was just trying to avoid my own thoughts.
And we're making you confront the trauma.
Yeah, I'm like, because I flipped through a little bit of the book,
Yeah.
and it gets to like the trauma section, and I was like, oh no. So like
Yeah.
I was already pissed, and then I'm like, now I have to sit with myself for 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. And
Yeah.
so I remember first going through that, and I was so pissed. And it was so similar to like CrossFit, like, oh, I gotta fucking go do this. But by the end of that mindfulness exercise, I was like, was like, huh. But now I wasn't willing to admit it.
Yeah.
But I felt better.
Of course.
You know what I mean? I was
Yeah.
like, fuck this is stupid. But I felt better. And so like I made an agreement with myself. All right, you're gonna sign up for CrossFit every day and you're gonna do this mindfulness every day. You're at least gonna take it serious. You're here, you're no matter what, you're here. So
Yeah.
fucking do it. And so I went with that mindset. And by like the second, third week, the mindfulness again is like a part of my daily routine now.
Right.
Like I can't live without it. It's the
Yeah.
best part of my day almost.
Well, and that's the beauty of the program. I think it's 66 days to change a habit or routine.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the duration, minimum duration. And so that's why the program again is laid out beautifully because it's about 66 days. But if you're being consistent with the exercise, with the spirituality, even with the learning and the making of your bed and all the dumb shit we make people do, which is we're not making them do anything. It's just this is how you do life because most people deep in addiction forgo all that shit, but you leave with such a strong foundation of having established so many good routines. Like we took away a bunch of shit, but we also put in a bunch of shit that now you get to take with you to be successful.
Yeah. And because especially with people dealing with drugs or alcohol, if you just remove drugs or alcohol, that's a long, shitty road, in my opinion. Like you have to replace it with routine, with routine's the biggest one for me, at least.
Yep.
And like the make your bed thing, you know, we've all seen the Admiral, right? The make your bed Admiral YouTube video.
Yeah.
And starting your day off with making your bed is a good way to start your day.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not going to hurt you. So so I was very resistant to all of it in the beginning, and now I can't live without it.
Well, yeah, but that goes back to ego again. Like as a grown adult, I don't need to be told to make my bed.
Oh, I get that one a lot from clients. Like, man, I'm a grown ass adult.
I'm here. I didn't pay $40,000 to clean, a bathroom. It's like, well, first of all, your insurance paid.
Yeah.
But second of all, this is we're community environment. We share our space, but it's like such a foreign thought to a lot of people.
Yeah, to take care of yourself.
Yeah,
it's very foreign.
Yeah,
like that's one of the more difficult clients that we get is the one that don't feel like they need to make their bed.
Yeah,
or don't feel like they need to do their chore.
Yeah,
or don't feel like they need to go to fitness, because we do yoga too.
Yep.
So we're not making you go do CrossFit, but like if you have all three of those things, if you're resistant to all three of those things, it's going to be a long day for you,
Oh yeah.
you know? And it's not set up to be mean. It's set up to like, because as soon as you start seeing them do those three things, all of a sudden they're happier,
Yeah.
they're more in tune with themselves, like they're nicer to people, because it's crazy. But like if, and I love the health and fitness aspect of things, because I was always mad at myself for being overweight. But what I never did was ate healthy and worked out.
Yeah.
But I was always pissed. But it's crazy.
Yeah. Genetics,
Yeah,
fucking this,
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But it's nuts. Just
Yeah.
eat healthy and work out and watch what happens.
Oh my God, you sleep better.
Oh wow, it was crazy. Like it just none of that made sense.
Yeah.
You know, I was always looking for the pill,
Yeah.
or I was always
Or
looking
why you're the exception to eat healthy and work
yeah.
out. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so what's Joe Rogan's vitamin routine?
Yeah.
That's what I'll do then. Like
Yeah.
I'll get
Yeah.
on like I remember that was like one of the things I did before I came in was like I Googled like Joe Rogan's vitamins, and I was like, yeah, all right, so I'm gonna get on this vitamin routine. I got them. They're in my cabinet. I've
Yeah.
never touched them. You know,
Yep.
it's like stuff like that I think as a society we're too stuck on,
Oh yeah.
like that fad of like, okay, I bought the Peloton.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
you want to bypass the work. You
yeah,
think if you just have this thing, kind of like we talked about in staff meeting last week, the be do have. If I have this thing, it'll make me be this person. It's like, no, no, no. You got to be this person to have that thing.
yeah.
And people get it backwards.
And the if this then that has always been
Yep.
a thought process of
Yep.
my entire life. Like it goes right back to why you moved all over, I moved all over. Like if I moved to Florida,
Yeah.
then all my troubles will go away, or if I moved to California, then all my troubles will go away. So but I was never the person, or I was never looking at me like, all right, dude, if you want to be this man,
Yeah.
just be that man, and then you'll get what you're trying to get.
Yeah.
And I never understood that. And it took me to when I was early on as a staff member, because I was always bitching at Tots. I'm like, Tots, I've been doing this for a year now, man. I'm still like 40 pounds overweight. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell, blah, blah, blah. And Tots, very Tots like, just sat there and nodded his head and just sitting there listening to me. And he's like, yeah, well, a lot of people, want results without putting in the work. And I was like, you motherfucker, dude.
Oh, that cuts.
I was like, oh, I hate you, Tots. And it's like people like that, like Tots, like at Elevate, that just make it that much better, because Tots is Tots.
Yeah.
He is the most consistent human I've ever met. And so
That's
like
an awesome way
I
to put it.
kind of went into that conversation almost hoping for a Tots response.
Yeah.
And so, and I knew I was gonna get one, but like I went in kind of whining,
Yeah.
and like I came out with like, he's right. But now, if that was 2 years ago, I would have been like, "Fuck that guy."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And trying to figure out ways that he's not walking that to break him down a
I
little
would,
bit.
I would have been
Yeah.
like, "He doesn't have a degree. He doesn't."
Yeah.
I would have broke him down to reasons why he doesn't. But
Yeah.
another lesson that I've learned in life is, if I'm looking for a reason for it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out.
Yep.
And I will find that reason 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing my whole life. And I still catch myself doing that.
Yeah.
And so now I'm very much so on a path of being open to all avenues, and not just pigeonholing myself, or like, well, this isn't going to work out, but I mean, I'll do it, but it's not going to work out. Like, it's just a shit attitude to have.
Yeah.
Like
But it's a lot of years of programming. I mean, it's not like you're trying to reverse something that's been a bad habit for a year. It's a lot of years of being a certain way and thinking a certain way to overcome. It's not going to happen overnight all the
no,
time.
and it goes right back to the instant gratification. Like, but we want it to.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see the infomercial
Yeah.
that says, "Oh, personal growth is in this pill. Take it."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
I want that commercial, but it's never going to happen. And
Yeah.
so it goes right back to like understanding and loving that journey,
Yeah.
and kind of like a stoic kind of mindset, if you will,
Yep.
and like just being in the present and being okay with where you're at right now. Because if you're not happy where you're sitting, you're never going to be happy. Now, you can be upset, but like you still have to find like happiness. Whereas for me, I always was looking for happiness. I was never experiencing it.
Yeah.
And because as soon as I accomplished something, I was like, well, okay, fuck that. And then the next one.
On to the next
On
thing.
to the next thing. And I didn't even like take a minute to like
Mm.
take it in,
Or acknowledge and validate yourself from having achieved that.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think as overcoming addiction, we're really bad about that. Like taking positive feedback or validation or
Mhm.
acknowledgement. It's like, yeah, yeah, okay, but now I got to worry about this. Like, we don't even take that time to really like soak in, like, yeah, but you fucking did it.
One of my favorite experiment or things that I like to witness is like we do the client assembly on Saturdays. And so the clients go around and give each other wins.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is clients are pretty eager to tell someone else they did a great job.
Yep.
But when the client is receiving the win, and I still do this to this day,
Same.
but like it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
thanks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like being able to say thank you is such a important skill to learn too.
It
And like
is.
because that involves you looking at yourself, believing what that person's saying to you,
Yeah.
accepting it, and then replying with a thank you.
It's true. I can handle an insult way easier than I can handle a validation.
It's don't like because we've programmed ourselves to believe the insult
Yeah.
and not the validation.
Yeah.
And that was so hard for me to to conquer and be able to like because again, I would have the light off in my bathroom for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. And so how in the fuck am I going to believe when you say, "Oh, you're doing so great"? How am I going to believe that if I don't believe it myself? And now it's going to, in my mind, I'm going to be like, "Oh, Angie doesn't know what she's fucking talking about."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I did that, but what about this? And I
y-
still got to do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So being it, but
Yeah.
then if we go too far
Mm.
with it, be like, "Yeah, damn right, I'm great at this."
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Then
saying?
your
Like,
ego starts coming back
it's
in.
like you son of a bitch. Come on, but
It's true.
everything's good in moderation, right? Like,
Yeah,
like we have to figure that out too, like the ego,
we
but
do.
that's part of the journey too.
It is. And receiving, positive and negative and just being like, okay, thank you.
So that's another one too,
Yeah.
is like receiving constructive feedback,
Yeah.
whereas before I
Mm,
would not even like entertain the idea of, hey, well, when you get home we gotta talk.
yeah.
Like back in the day, I would be just wouldn't go home
Yeah.
because I knew what was going to happen. But now I actually like genuinely like sitting down and hearing the things that like others would like me to work on
Yeah.
because especially if it's coming from someone that I respect,
Yeah.
because I want to emulate the qualities that they have. So clearly I'm willing to sit with you and like hear the constructive criticism, you know, but being able to do that was tough initially for sure.
For sure. Well, and I think it becomes one of those things where the more we avoid it, like we know this conversation's coming, the bigger we build it up in our brains. And then when
Oh,
you actually just sit down and have the conversation, you're like, wait, that wasn't so bad. Like, why did I avoid this and make it such a big ordeal when I could just confronted it head on and it been a 5 minute conversation and like, I get you and we're good and move forward.
like when I was doing, when, you know, clients do amends and everything, I went through and I wasn't there for years for my sisters. I just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so I had to make amends for that. Like I
Mm,
wasn't there for the birth of the children and stuff like that. And for like the first week of knowing that this was going to happen, I made this anthill into a mountain, you know?
yeah.
And I was so worried about it and all this. And I was like, long story short, is to your point, like it was so much better than I ever thought.
Yeah.
And I was just making this huge thing out of it and catastrophizing everything about it. And it
Yeah.
was like the first 4 minutes was me and my sister. I said hello and she said hello, and then we just cried for 4 minutes.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like it
yeah.
was like that was what it was.
Yeah.
And in reality, like I think that's another defense mechanism that we have. We're like, just whatever you do, don't do that because it's going to end up terribly or whatever it
Yeah.
is. You know?
Yeah. And preparing yourself for the worst and this. And then it's like, oh, wait, I didn't waste all my time preparing for anything. This is a beautiful healing
This
journey
is
we just had together.
it's similar to like going to CrossFit, like, oh man, it's gonna be the worst workout I've ever had. It's gonna suck. All that. And then by the time we're done, we're all high fiving and saying, "I'll see you tomorrow."
Yeah. I crushed it. Yeah.
Crushed it. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I always had difficulties accepting compliments and then the criticism, and
Yeah.
I was unwilling to go through the learning process for some reason, and I wish I knew why as a younger, like if I go back and kind of deep dive in my 20s, like I'm, and you got, what, Logan's what, 20
22. Yeah.
22, like around that age is when I was like resistant to all incoming
Yeah.
verbal like criticism or anything. Like I was like, I'm gonna do this myself.
Yeah.
I don't know, like is like that's common in that age range?
Yeah, you said, oh, so is Logan going to take over your business? I'm like, nope. He wants to go he wants to go do his own thing. He doesn't want
Yeah,
me to pave the way. He wants to earn it himself.
which is good. He wants to earn it, right? But
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I just
That is a tough age for men. I mean, women too, but in particular, because yeah, he's trying to be stoic and I can handle this, but he's also me. So he's the counselor. So everybody confides in him and tells him everything. He's the rock, but he doesn't put himself out in
Yeah.
that way to others. And that's what I'm working with him on, is like being vulnerable and opening himself up and sharing himself with others.
So with that being said too, like that was the most valuable thing that I did as a counselor, was in the group settings. Initially, I wouldn't share.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big mistake. And I know it was, because like as soon as I started sharing, became like common ground now.
Yeah.
And like the experience was now both ways. And so like, I think it's huge to be able to do that. Like you
It
can't be
is.
one directional. Like you're gonna have to be able to open up, right? The vulnerability thing. But again, it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And so that's what I work with him on, because he probably looks to me and go, "Oh, you overshare, mom." And his sister shares a lot. And so he's like going like opposite of her. So, and it's finding that place of what is comfortable for him and what works and that sort of thing.
Man, to be young again.
I know.
I'm watching these clients come through, and like, especially I have so much respect for anyone that goes through, but really like the young ones. Because that road's got to be tough, right? Like, I mean, you're 18 years old, 19,
No.
20 years old. Like
It's hard for someone that's 65 too.
that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Both have their advantages and
Yeah,
disadvantages.
but like there's like this, they're so young,
Yeah.
like, but I have so much respect for them because they're doing this.
Yeah.
And to your point, the older ones as well, like some of my favorite clients ever were like the OGs, but like these younger kids, they could easily just be like, I got this, and and leave,
Yeah.
but they're choosing to go through that. And I wish I would have done that at a younger age.
Totally. Like what a gift they have.
Yeah.
Like it's so awesome. And they don't all see it. But they do. I mean, a lot of them do eventually or afterwards.
Yeah, they get shaken up a little bit.
Yeah, or they go try it their way and then they come back and they're like, okay, actually, my way didn't work just
Were
now.
you that way?
Yeah, I fought it the whole way. I was young. I came in at 22.
22.
Exactly. Yeah.
22-year-old Angie.
Yeah.
What was 22-year-old Angie like?
Oh man, I was wild. I'm kind of similar to this, but I'm really rebellious. Really rebellious.
How long did it take you, do you think, to like?
It took at least a year. But for me, fortunately for me, I had that case, prison hanging over my head. So there was like this extra impetus to get it right, because I knew what my future would be if I didn't.
You were scared straight, literally.
I mean, I still thought it. I mean, I still figured out my ways to circumvent systems, but I figured it out. Yes. I was fortunate enough back then, it was like the Old West. So, there was a lot of trust and doing things like, yeah, I got away with a lot, but eventually I got it together on my own. So, yeah.
Well,
I mean, I never left. So I figured it out while I was there, obviously.
Right. That's badass though. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like being 35 and all that, it has its advantages for me because I had all that life experience coming into it,
I think you're in the sweet spot now.
That's I'm finding that, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of the sweet spot right now.
It's the sweet spot. Yeah, you're in a great place.
Mhm.